Hello, everyone. I'm happy to see that you're still with us. I hope you are enjoying today so far and you'll find it informative. Our next session will be on good communication between businesses and their clients. And this will be delivered by James Enos, who is the National Account Manager for the South Region at Hodge Bank. He will be discussing the importance of good service and how it bolsters the mortgage journey overall. And there will be a live Q&A session after his presentation, so don't forget to ask your questions in the chat box. Over to you, James.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to a session on communication today. My name's James Enos, and I'm the National Account Manager, as Shakina said, for Hodge Bank in the South. I'll be taking you through some key areas today. I'm just going to bring up my presentation so that you can all see the slides. The session today will be going through great communication and how you can get the best out of your lender. Okay, and there's a number of different agendas, items that I'll be taking you through today, which should hopefully help your understanding of how to engage with Hodge, but the wider market as well, and utilize those skills to help the mortgage journey and make it easier for yourself, for your clients, and for everyone who's involved in the mortgage journey and helping your clients obviously move through to completion and understand how cases fit with each lender. So first of all, just take you through the agenda. We'll be looking at the broker and lender communication pre and post pandemic at first. So that's just having a deeper dive really into how things have changed and how that's been impacted and changed and affected by the current or recent circumstances around the pandemic. We'll then go further into SLAs and processing and how you and your clients can keep up to date. Really important part of the mortgage journey and the service that's offered to yourselves, but also to the lender itself and anyone else within that process. Application submission, so telling the story, really important part of how you engage with the lender and how we can understand and the underwriters can understand the client's circumstances. Everybody has, from a client perspective, their own story to tell and situation. So it's just about how we can fine tune that and help you with that process. Utilizing the support of the BDMs and underwriters, again, from a Hodge perspective, but also the offering and the service offered would be widely offered by other lenders within the market. And then just wrapping it up from an effective communication point of view and the positive outcomes. If you've got any questions, then you can ask them through the portal, and I'll be happy to answer those within the time we've got today. So let's look at the broker and lender communication pre and post pandemic. So as I've said there and within the notes there, there's no doubt that recent events have had a significant impact on the way that we engage and communicate through the mortgage process. And that's through all the different key stakeholders within the process, as you can see in the wheel there. That isn't the full list. There are other stakeholders that could be involved in the process. And there's lots of different parts of the journey that obviously could break down from a communication point of view. And it's so important that obviously you as administrators and brokers can keep abreast of that and make sure that that is fluid and it moves forward in the best way for you and your clients. I think one of the real positives to take out of the situation is how everyone involved in the journey has had to adapt quickly to the new environment, but also how they've done that and how demonstrated their ability to evolve in the new environment. So utilizing technology as we are today, okay, is obviously a clear example of that, but also making sure that there's clear and effective communication that continues right the way through the process, because, you know, that's how we're going to be able to provide the best service and experience for customers as a whole. So if we look at the different type of communication and those subtle changes really we've seen within the way that we interact together. If you see pre-pandemic, you can see the key traditional communication methods such as your post, telephone and field-based BDMs, of course, those field-based being in the field, but also in and out of meetings as well. And the telephone team being there to be able to serve your needs, you know, through the lender support lines. Email, which is something that has obviously continued to be a key communication method through between each of the stakeholders within that journey. Mortgage portals, we know ourselves that we utilize that at Hodge as a really important tool to be able to give you up-to-date information. That might be packaging information, that might be to indicate obviously whether we're happy to accept the case from a decision in principle point of view. Web chat, it's grown, web chat. It's been an even more prevalent part of our communication process really since the pandemic. I'll show you a little bit about that on the next slide on how that has moved forward. Face-to-face has been the challenge as such during the pandemic. So we used to, as a field-based team member myself, utilize the face-to-face as part of the key part of our communication on a day-to-day basis. We have had to adapt, obviously, and we haven't had the opportunity to attend industry and network and club events as we used to, but we've moved on to obviously utilizing the virtual services since the pandemic. Underwriter calls, if you look at the second wheel that we've got on the slide, has become a real focus of ours at Hodge, and making sure that we can reach out to administrators, to brokers, and to customers when we've got questions on a case, should we need to ask those to help that mortgage application move forward. Field and telephone-based BDMs have been doing, a similar role in some sense, although obviously the field-based team have been, as same as myself, have been using the virtual communication. You have had the luxury really of being able to get hold of field-based BDMs more easily since the pandemic, and it's important that as a lender that we continue that that good contact and that easy access as such. At Hodge, we've brought more of the telephone team in so that we can continue that and make sure that you get the service that you've received during the pandemic period. Email, so we've switched in posting out documentation to purely email and documentation, should that be an offer to broker, administrators, clients, and direct to conveyancers further on down the line. And we found that a much easier way to make sure that the information is passed on as quickly as possible. I've mentioned portal, that remains and will continue to be a real key area, and I'm going to go into that in a little bit more detail in a moment. And then virtual meetings, webinars, has just become a really useful source for all parties to be able to get more information, more knowledge, and more understanding, as we are today, from your key contacts and supporters within the market. And as I said, web chat continues to grow, and the virtual and face-to-face events, we're all hoping in some way that we can get out and obviously get back to the events that we've got, but we know we've got this additional communication tool should we need it, if anything obviously changes going forward in the future. Talked a little bit about web chat. Web chat's a really easy service to use and communication tool. If you went into Hodge for Intermediaries website, you'd find that you can ask a query straight away. Now, that might be a query on an existing case, that might be a query on a new inquiry, or it might be just a criteria question that you can't find the information that you need. It's quite unique to that case, and you need a quick response on it. I would always stress that this is a great option for communication purposes. It's something that, again, you can see from the graph there, since the pandemic, more and more brokers are using, and it can sometimes be the answer to when you've got a busy telephone line and you're ringing in and you can't get hold of, say, a BDM or someone within the or an underwriter within the lender, then you can ask a quick question and generally you get a very quick response on that. So really useful tool and something to think about. So let's talk about now SLAs and processing, so on how to keep your clients up to date. Okay, this is a really important element and part of the service that we offer as a lender, and many lenders do exactly the same thing, and it's come a long way in recent years in providing clearer service communication to you and your clients. So we've got our unique way of publishing these timescales. You can see I've taken a snapshot of Hodge for Intermediaries website, and we publish those right on the front page, so you can get a good steer on obviously how we're doing with our service and how quickly you're going to get a turnaround and information from us as a lender. It's really important that you keep you up to date because it's part of the service we offer, and it can mean the difference between you placing a mortgage with Hodge or with another lender, or deciding to place a case for someone else. It's a really stressful process for some people when you're applying for a mortgage. And the more information, the more reassurance that you can have from a point of view as being an administrator and a broker who have close contact with your clients, to keep them abreast of exactly when things are going to be looked at and how quickly we can turn cases round is extremely important. A good example of this is from a service point of view. It can be an early consideration from a broker, administrator, or anyone in the process and a client of being able to understand if they're going to place the mortgage with a lender or not. A good example of that is the stamp duty deadlines that obviously are looming on us at the moment. And someone who may have wanted to get a quick turnaround on an application may be looking for that as a key decision of whether they're going to agree to having the case placed with a certain lender. Different types of SLAs that we publish ourselves is how quickly we review a decision in principle. At Hodge, we do a manual assessment on a DIP, which again is different to some lenders who do an instant decision on a decision in principle, and we turn that round in 1 business day and give an update through our portal. Documents, so that's additional documents and post and information that's added to a case after being requested. That again is a good understanding of how that's going to be looked at and how quickly. The fully packaged application is really important because that gives an indication that if we've got all the documents on an application and a valuation is being received, we will wrap that case up as quickly as we can and help to smooth out that mortgage journey. So I'd always recommend that you provide as many of those documents as possible. With Hodge, we will, through our portal and after a decision in principle, provide you with a list of documentation. If all of that is submitted from day one and you apply for the application, then we'll instruct the valuation straight away, and you can be rest assured then that as soon as that lands, we will give you a full update on assessment of the whole case. And the final SLA that's highlighted there is speed to offer. Speed to offer, again, is a really good indicator to understand how well a lender is doing with service. We all look at that on a regular basis and look to bring that down as quickly as possible, but it'll give you a good idea of the average case timescales and how quickly we're being able to move through the client's application and get it through to offer, which is really important so that they can move on to the legal part of the process. The next section is about application submission, and this is a really key element and something that I wanted to bring to everyone's attention today with regards to telling the story. So I mentioned it a little bit earlier in the presentation today. Understanding the client's circumstances and how and the information that's provided is so important to the lender, the underwriter, and anyone who's going to be engaging with that documentation, the application. So I would always suggest we don't rely on the hard facts themselves. They're really useful and they're the key parts that obviously we assess the application on, but additional information sections are on both our DIP and on our application. And I'd always encourage you to put any information in there that you feel is relevant to help that application go smoothly. If the underwriter can't decipher the information and will have additional questions, they'll only come back to you and ask for further information. Now, if you can provide that information from the outset, those questions are answered, and then obviously it's going to make it easier then to move it on to the next stage of the mortgage journey and mortgage process. And the more accurate the information you provide, obviously, the less questions are going to be. So for me, it's a really important element that you answer the questions before they get asked and tell the story from the client's perspective so that the underwriter understands that, they can consider that as part of their underwriting process, and it's going to be easier for you then as you go through the mortgage journey with Hodge or with any other lender. Getting the best out of the portal. So again, all portals are different. This is a view of the Hodge portal itself. It gives you lots of information, really helpful in understanding obviously what services are offered through the portal itself. So a summary of the case illustrations. Many lenders offer a service, as we do, with regards to being able to pull an illustration. So that might be an ESIS or KFI from the system itself. Case documents, so uploading documents to the portal and being able to keep all those documents in one place has moved on leaps and bounds in recent years, and again is a place where I would always encourage you to upload your documents rather than email them in, because that's where obviously they're going to be held and viewed. Case messages, so if there's additional information, this is where the underwriter will interact with you, and you'll be able to interact with them as well. And also the BDMs, from our perspective, also put information. And then there's further information such as your completion information, so you'll be able to understand if you haven't spoken to a solicitor or spoken to your client at the end of the completions process, whether the case is completed or when it's going to complete. So really useful to be able to understand how to get the best out of the portal itself. And then utilizing the support available. So that's BDMs and underwriters. So from a Hodge perspective, and I know from my colleagues, other BDMs within the field, the focus is really about how can we as BDMs go the extra mile for you as our broker clients or administrators. And what we always encourage at Hodge is for you to get in touch at the earliest stage of the inquiry as possible. This will give you the confidence, once you've run the inquiry past the BDM team, who are extremely experienced, whether or not the case will fit with Hodge. Okay, if you feel there's any elements of that inquiry that may or may not fall under our acceptable criteria. If not, we'll be able to refer them on to the underwriting team. We have a point of contact process, and that will then give us the understanding of whether those slight niches within that customer's circumstances are going to fit, and we are comfortable in accepting them, whether they're in policy or whether they're outside of policy. It's always best to check, and I would encourage you to do that as much as possible. And we are the middleman, so we are the person who you're going to be able to speak to, be able to liaise with other parts of the business. Again, at Hodge, we can liaise with our property department, who can assess the type of property, again, if it's something slightly unusual, and give you that confidence before you even start going through the DIP or the application process of whether or not you're going to be able to fit that case with the lender itself. Obviously, we can't control everything fully until it's fully underwritten and we've seen everything in its full light, and again with the survey itself. But we really do look to help you when it's really needed from an early point of call. And then you've got the underwriters. So from a contact point of view, we will encourage our underwriters to get in touch with you on the base after assessing maybe a DIP or with an application. And again, that might be through the portal, that might be through email, that might be them giving you a call because they need to have a conversation. And sometimes email and the portal messages don't quite get the message out as clearly as it needs to be done. So sometimes a telephone call, utilizing that old method of communication, can still be the best way of chatting the case through and answering those questions they may have. So building relationship is a really key part of the process. I would always encourage you, build a great relationship, as we will look to do with you, with your local BDM and with the underwriters if you can, and get that rapport. The more you speak to a BDM, the more they're going to be able to give you that inside knowledge on the lender and help and support you through any future applications. And you'll get to a point then when you won't necessarily always need to call the BDM, because unless it's obviously on a specific question, because you'll understand that criteria and feel much more comfortable with it. And when that relationship builds, it obviously helps in the long run with the overall communication process. And then if I finally just touch on how you can get in touch. So again, as I mentioned, there's lots of different communication tools. This will show you here from a Hodge perspective that we've got our Hodge local BDM finder, web chat, lending support line, which is an 0800 number. We've got a lending support email. If you don't have time to give us a call, or you feel that we're obviously going to have to wait a little while and you just want to get a message out, or you can even email the BDM team and national account team direct to make sure that obviously it's going there and they can come back to you within a timely manner. And in addition to that, you've got the portal messaging. So lots of different communication tools available to you. Utilize them as best you can. So just to give a summary, effective communication within this process will make a massive difference to a lot of different areas within the process itself. It gives better productivity, because if we've communicated clearly and effectively from day one, then ultimately it will allow you then to move on to the next case or the next piece of work that you've got on your desk. Consistency and workflow, again, it means that an underwriter can work through the cases that they've got in their files to make sure that they can move through those quickly, understand the case, and give you accurate information back through the process. Stronger business relationships. We as a lender would obviously understand whether the business that we're receiving is being packaged as good quality, and we will encourage that and look to work with you on that. And obviously that will improve the relationships that we've got with you and with others, with the other key stakeholders within the market. It gives you better control. So control of a situation is key, particularly when obviously you're looking to maintain the professional image of the business and the service that you provide to your clients. And by knowing and being on I suppose on the ball with those different cases that you're managing through, and there may be multiple cases in most cases, then that will obviously help maintain the professional image of your business. Better response from stakeholders. So when you're asking the right questions at the right times, you're going to get a quicker and a better response. Quick problem solving. So you're going to be able to answer those questions by finding out that information nice and quickly, so that you can give reassurance and set your clients' minds to rest. And obviously you can make quicker decisions because you're going to understand how a lender works, and obviously how they can support you throughout the process. So it all works in a circle together. I hope that's been helpful to you today in running through the different types of communication. Some of you may have already been using this on a regular basis. So, you know, it's just about finding out how things are moving forward and how to get the best out of your lender. So thanks very much for that. I'll hand back now to Shakina for further questions. Sorry, Shakina, I can't quite hear you.
Sorry, I was on mute.
That's okay.
I was just saying thank you for the presentation and highlighting the importance of communication.
That's fine.
Which doesn't help when you're muted. But I did want to ask, so you did mention some of the more successful practices during the pandemic that the industry as a whole adopted, and what was a bit less successful, and what can the industry learn from that going forward?
It's a really good question. I think it's about being prepared for the unknown as such. I think when we came into the pandemic as an industry, it was quite a shock, really, and there was a lot of questions being asked about how we were going to be able to engage remotely, how we were going to be able to continue the great service that we've been offering to those within the process and the mortgage journey, and maintain that through then to obviously whatever position we're going to end up being. And I think early on, lenders in some ways did struggle with communicating what impacts were they were having on timescales, how that was impacting service, and how we were going to move on and how quickly we were going to move on with that. So I think there could have been a bit of a better communication in the challenges as such through the environment. But ultimately, I think everyone was in the same boat in some way, and most of the industry worked through that together. And I know we're in a great position now. Lenders have managed to mobilize themselves from a remote point of view, brought new measures in, as I've discussed, and adapt its service offering to be even better in the new environment.
Of course. And we do have a question from Kerry Blackmore. You did sort of touch on finding out what your lenders prefer and getting a good relationship with your BDMs. But she does ask, is it always best to contact the BDM first regarding a case, or would it be better to call the general helpline?
Well, the service is there for both. We have BDMs on the desk who do manage the general helpline, and also BDMs in the field who look after you within an area. We at Hodge allow brokers, administrators, whoever it may be, to get in touch with us, whatever's the easiest way. But I think it's always prudent to get in touch with a lender if you've got a concern about a client's circumstances and whether they're going to fit with the lender's criteria. So I'll always encourage you to get in touch, regardless of whichever method, to make sure that you've got that reassurance, and that you're not going to go through wasting some time or processing time. Time is money, as they say, in being able to place that case with a lender. So yeah, it doesn't really matter from a Hodge perspective whether you go through the lender support line or the BDM. But I think from a rapport point of view, if you contact your regional BDM, then you're going to build up that relationship, and it'll help you with obviously getting in touch and talking to that BDM in the future.
And while technology and sort of the awareness of isolation made some people more likely to reach out and be more communicative, what can people in the industry do if there are circumstances where a client or industry peers are unresponsive or virtually unreachable?
Yeah, it's a real challenge, and it's a really difficult question in some ways. But I think I'll do my best to answer that. I think those who are struggling with the new way of communicating, and some of those, I would say, virtual communication methods, because not everyone, of course, is going to be comfortable with that. It's about trying to find the right media for that person. So I think when choice is the key part in this scenario, if you give your clients and those within the process the option of a number of different communication methods, that will only serve to give them a choice and allow them to pick the best communication tool and method for them. Okay. And I think by doing that, we'll hopefully encourage them to make contact more often and feel comfortable that you're happy to deal with them in whatever media that suits their circumstances.
And so you did mention some of the newer forms of communication channels, or the ones you've used more since the pandemic. And once things are changing forward.
Sorry, could you just repeat that, Shakina? You did break up just slightly.
Sorry. I was just wondering how Hodge Bank would apply some of its changes going forward with the new forms of communication that it has adopted to adapt to the pandemic.
Yeah, I think, and it's fine-tuning what we previously did. So as I mentioned in the first slide, we've more or less taken post out of our process with documentation. So we'll always go direct with emails, secure emails with the documentation, such as mortgage offers, illustrations, etc., going forward. And we're going to continue to adopt that now more and more in the future. We've obviously brought in more telephone-based BDMs into the team, so more expertise and more accessibility in a timely manner through our 0800 number, when we know that we're going to have our field-based team in not quite a accessible environment, because they're going to be out and about doing different events and obviously team meetings in the field as such. So we're going to have more people to contact, and webmail encouraged through that. And also we're going to mobilize, or we are mobilizing, our underwriting team to be able to pick up the phone and have that conversation to make sure that we don't, I suppose, sit on a question when we're not getting an answer back from a broker or administrator.
And we've got one or two questions from Robert Leonard, in fact, about your criteria. So what is the maximum age that Hodge Bank lends to, and do you lend on retirement properties?
We don't lend on retirement property, so we don't offer a mortgage on something with a restriction. However, we do have a very wide age range when it comes to lending into retirement. So that starts at 50 on both our 50 plus interest only product and our Rio products. And then it ranges right up to the age of 95 on our 50 plus, okay, with the oldest age on application 88. And on our Rio product, obviously it's a lifetime term. So the natural end of that mortgage would be in the event of death or long-term care. So it would, technically be able to run past that 95 age bracket. But the oldest age on that particular product is the same as the 50 plus at 88.
And one final question, how can we make sure that we keep hold of the most successful ways that we have learned to communicate during this process going forward?
I think it's use them. That's the key part. I think we've brought new communication methods through. Okay, they were there. Some were existing, but not quite as widely used. I think by utilizing all the communication tools that are available to you, that's only going to encourage a lender to be able to keep and maintain those as a viable communication tool. If they become dormant, then obviously managing those is not going to be quite as an effective communication tool from a lender's perspective, and there may be a risk of that obviously being moved aside and maybe just working with the other types of communication, or even bringing something new in. So your feedback's really important as well. If you feedback that something doesn't work for you, then as a lender, we will always assess that from that point of view as our customers and look to try and develop that further should we need to.
Thank you. And that is all that we have time for. So thank you for the presentation, and thank you
Pleasure.
everyone for your questions. There is now a 30-minute break. Please do come back for the next session at 4 o'clock, which will be held by Neve Downey, who is Business Development Manager for London at Bluestone Mortgages. And she will talk you through how to package cases for complex credit mortgages. So see you then. Thank you.
Thanks all.